So welcome to this video. It's Tom O'Brien, a mental health herbalist, and I'm here today with Jonny Woodall from the UK, and he's a herbalist. We came across each other on Instagram, and he's given us an interview today, and we're going to focus on men's health, which is a really important topic, and you're going to really enjoy this video. So Jonny, welcome to the video and to the interview, I should say. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into herbal medicine.
Cheers, Tom. Yeah, thanks for having me. I got into herbal medicine after a period of illness in my early 20s where I was suffering really badly with mental health problems, had a lot of depression, anxiety, panic attacks, obsessive thinking patterns. I was very suicidal, and it was changing my diet that originally helped me, coming off gluten, dairy, sugar, caffeine, and eventually I came across a herbalist, and that was it. That was the magic that really sorted me out. It was a very, very, very dark period of my life in my early 20s, and it was probably about 24, 25 when I met the herbalist for the first time, and my life kind of really took off after that. And that's how I got into being a herbalist, because once my mind and my body and my soul kind of started to come back together, I started to think, well, this is amazing, this is magical, this is unbelievably powerful. Why did nobody ever tell me about this? Why did my doctor or my psychiatrist never mention any of these things? And I found a course at Lincoln University to study a Bachelor of Science degree in herbal medicine, and that was it. I just went for it. I didn't think that I would actually really become a successful medical herbalist, but I just knew I had to study the plants. And in the end, everything kind of just took shape, and things have progressed since then. And my physical and mental health are the best they've been, well, probably before I even got sick. Yeah, just every year just seemed to get better and better and better. And the plants have obviously guided me along the way.
That's powerful.
So yeah, I think that's a good overview of what happened.
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And obviously then you bring from that personal experience into your work with clients, and particularly around men, you know, being a man yourself suffering with mental health issues. And we're going to focus today on mental health, and even just the whole area about suicide. So maybe we might just start off there. You know, why do you think the rates of suicide are so high, or what's going on in our society that people are choosing to end their own lives, and particularly the problem with young men?
It's a big problem, and a lot of people are starting to wake up to it. It's starting to filter into the media, but the facts are at the moment that in the UK, one man takes his life every 2 hours approximately. So it's about 12, 13 a day. There are lots of theories, and there's lots of agreement or disagreement around what that might be. But in my experience, I think it boils down to a combination of weakened family units, a disconnection between or dysfunctional relationship between father and son, and a confusing portrayal of masculine archetypes in society, which I know we'll probably get into later with archetypes. But when I say confusing, I think that we have a lot of archetype portrayal in films that seem to portray, for the most part, good qualities of masculine archetypes, and there's the bad ones as well, and negative portrayals that we need to see.
Just give us a quick definition of what is an archetype.
An archetype is a universal inborn personality or trait. It can be a model of human behavior. The archetypes kind of came into the intellectual realm of discussion through Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, who started to notice that among all faiths, religions and cultures, art, music, were these kind of portrayals of human behaviors that seemed to be in each culture or each part of the world, and he labeled that as an archetype. So the easiest way of looking at archetypes is in films. So something like Game of Thrones, which portrays like the honorable good king, or the evil kings, and the hero, the tricksters. There's loads of different archetypes, and you can almost flip them into a different film. So Lord of the Rings, you've got Gandalf, who's like the wise old man, and then you've got Sauron, who's the magician that's kind of gone evil. And within archetype portrayals, humans can identify parts of their own mind or psyche or behaviors with each one. So the archetypes are things that exist within all of us and span all of time.
So tell us then, tell us again on what's happening with men who are committing suicide. What's the archetype that they're in, and what's the one that they should be in, or what's the struggle there?
I don't think we can necessarily label that there's a particular archetype that comes through with suicide. I don't think that that's a question that can be answered using the archetype model. And the thing with archetypes is that there's an unlimited amount of them. There's traditional archetypes that a lot of us can easily identify with, but then there's archetypes that almost just go on and on and on and portrayed endlessly. So and we can use different archetypes at different parts of our lives, different parts of the day, depending on how we're communicating with people. So going back to the question of why do men commit suicide, I think that if we're discussing archetypes, I think that often in real life, men develop a lot easier when we have other men to model and look at, who portray, let's say, honourable roles. You know, they act with integrity, they're honest, they have accountability, they're powerful, and they're wise, and they use their power in honourable ways. And I think that we're severely lacking real men in our society that we can actually see. So in films, it's fantasy. You can see how popular they are. You know, young boys love the whole Marvel film collection, and it's just all archetype portrayal constantly. Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, they all play out hero's journey. So we can see in fantasy that people are craving for it, but in real life, I mean, you look at politicians, you look at even sports stars that are very good at portraying the warrior archetype, but behind closed doors, you start to hear all this stuff come out in the media about that a lot of them have issues around addiction. They're not as marriages are breaking apart, or they've been unfaithful. You know, and I'm obviously not lumping all sports stars in that.
No, but
you can see that there's portrayals in our society of what it means to be a man that I think is very confusing, convoluted, and distorted. And men will always look out to look in, you know, to look at the world, to be able to feed back to themselves, well, who am I supposed to be, and how do I act? And if we don't have good role models, then we will always pick things that are just near to us, and sometimes they're not the best choices.
So it's like in a whole identity crisis maybe in men, where they don't have, you know, positive archetypes to look up to, or positive role models. Or is there a kind of a destruction of male identity in modern society? Or, you know, are we moving from, you know, the idea that men value themselves very much by what they do in their job and their identity, you know, or how can we help young men reflect on this and adopt new positive archetypes?
I think there's two questions in that. So totally agree. There's an identity crisis. Not sure how to necessarily analyze too much of the causes, the exact causes with that, other than what we've already spoken about. But how do we teach men how to find themselves, or how to step into a mature masculine role? And I believe that there are organisations that are out there that have started that and that are doing really, really good work. But there's a huge amount of scepticism around those organisations and fear, and in some ways quite rightly so. I mean, we're in a situation now, especially with activism and protests and Black Lives Matter and all these things that are happening at the moment. People are really speaking about oppression between hierarchies, people being downtrodden, and men acting in ways that I guess if you could use Jungian psychology, is out of shadow. You know, they're dark behaviors that can cause conflict among people. You know, look, all the wars we've had over the last however many decades, some of them seem completely insane. You know, they weren't fighting for good. They were just incredibly complicated affairs that involved incredible numbers of deaths on both sides for very little achieved. So we can see that when men act in violent ways, then bad things will happen. So coming back to trying to teach men how to act, it's all about trying to have older men guide the younger ones and facilitate them, which we used to do. You know, there's a lot of discussion around indigenous rites of passage among indigenous groups, so Native Americans, African tribes, the world over. Most boys, when they would start to go through puberty and start that very first process of going from boy to man, the older men would take the young boy and put him through some sort of semi-religious, ceremonial, sacred ritual that was about disconnecting him from his mother and his father, and trying to gift him the power of masculine energy, that you are a man, you can be powerful and you can be strong and you can be wise, and if you don't accept this, then you can be very destructive and you will you might not be on the right path. And a lot of those rituals involved physical activities, so it seems like men tend to respond to development through very physical things and doing things. So that the rituals would often involve stuff around suffering to some degree, short term. So it might be walking on coals, or you've got to dance for 3 days straight with no water and food in blaring sun with music like banging in your ears, or you've got to take some sort of psychedelic plant that will send you on a journey, and the plant will tell you all the bad things about yourself that you have to be wary of, and you're going to have to be aware of that because it'll trip your mind will trip you up in your life. So you can see that in our society we've completely lost that. The only initiation that boys have, if they choose to accept it, is usually going to the pub at 16 and getting trashed and trying to lose your virginity as fast as possible, and being completely meaningless. And it's this lack of connection between finding that life has meaning to it. It seems to be there's just a void, and therefore that void will be filled with meaningless pursuits and what is bandied around, which at the moment is alcohol, drugs, women, the pornography culture, instant gratification. I'd say that's my perception.
That's interesting. And you mentioned there men's groups and organizations you're involved in. Is it called the Mankind Project?
So
tell us a little bit about that.
The Mankind Project started in America, I think 20 or 30 years ago, and it was born out of seeing all of those things that I've just discussed, that there's a lot of men that are wandering around aimlessly without purpose, causing suffering to themselves, people around them, and they're disconnected from their families, and there's just a lot of alcohol and drug use that's filling that void. So they created an organization that sends men through a warrior initiation. So you leave your hometown, you sign up to this organization, and you go off to somewhere you've never been with lots of other men, and they put you through a warrior initiation that involves various activities. So to ignite the warrior archetype in you, so you can really feel it, because the archetypes are intellectual, but they're also embodied. So they exist in all of us if you choose to connect with them. And from that initiation and understanding your warrior, you then leave and go back to your hometown, where you have like your local Mankind Project group. And in Sheffield, we have about 25 men that have done this initiation, and we meet every 2 weeks, where we spend 2.5 hours in a men's circle, and we will run through a masculine archetype circle. So we'll go through the lover, warrior, magician, king, and within each round there are things that we can do and discuss and act upon to connect with that archetype and help each other. So it's amazing. I get to bring all of my fears, all of my insecurities, all of my confusing things that I can't figure out, problem solving, and in a 2.5 hour session I have 20 other men around me, all different ages, all different elements of society, different races, different ages, whatever. And I get a huge amount of feedback. Sometimes, I might be tripping myself up, and other men will hold me to account on what they see in how my behavior is influencing myself. So it's very, very, very powerful organization to clean up the things within certainly my life that are holding me back, stopping me, and creating chaos. So it's been amazing. It's been hugely transformational for me and all of the men that I've ever met who've been involved. But there are other men's organizations that do exist, that are out there. A band of brothers operate in the UK, and they specialize on taking initiated men into prisons, or particularly youth. It's just youth offenders. So they work with young men that are at the first signs of going off going down the wrong path. And their statistics are amazing. If you go on their website and you look at the statistics they hold on all of the men that do their Band of Brothers program, and the reduction in drug abuse and violent crime, reoffending, it's absolutely amazing. And then there's Male Journey, the Male Journey. That's another one. I think there's lots of independent, non-affiliated organisations popping up on Facebook. So there's lots and lots of options, and each men's group might they tend to have different ways of approaching self-development. But the idea amongst all of them, I would say, is that let's just get men together so that we can learn from each other and actually like make life meaningful, and not like just sit around a pub and drink and talk about pointless things. Like, let's turn up sober and put our hearts on the table and say, like, look, like, I'm a mess, can you help me? And like, it's amazing what alchemy can come out of that.
It sounds quite powerful. It sounds like something that is really needed, particularly given the struggles that men have and around their identity, and especially with unemployment. I think when men are unemployed, it's a big struggle, and then having no clear identity and leading into addictions and so forth. So let's maybe focus a little bit on herbs. So in your practice, I know you have a lot of experience from your own personal life, from the Mankind group. Tell us a little bit about how you work with men, and your experience of working with men in herbal medicine, and what kind of herbs help.
So I've had quite a number of men over the years come into my practice, and like most people, the first question is, why are you here? What's going on in your life? And often most men start with very physical things. I've got a bad knee, my tummy's a bit off, I've got this bad skin, or I'm a bit low. And as I unravel that, it starts to open up their emotional landscape and what's going on in their life. And I often find that in certainly the men that present with the worst physical shape or health problems, there's a huge dysfunctional relationship with their emotions, their life plan, their behaviors, their addictions. And some men don't realize that, just because they're not injecting heroin or smoking crack, that, being on your phone 5 hours a day, or using pornography for hours on end, like some men don't see that as an addiction. So kind of waking men up to those behaviors is a good first start. But the herbs that tend to work really well are these are herbs that also work for women as well. This is why it can get a bit confusing. You know that herbs do have this mysterious element to them, but in my practice, the ones that work for most men, or the ones that they have the very powerful response to, tend to be the tonic herbs. So ginseng, Panax ginseng, absolutely amazing. It's just, most men will taste that, and it's like, you just see their face just light up. It's just like, wow, what is that? It's just incredible. It's got this real, like, strong flavor to it. It's almost like that whiskey thing, like mature whiskey where men drink it. It's like, it's like matured. It's nice. And so Panax ginseng or Korean ginseng. There's another herb I use a lot called Hishu Wu. So Polygonum multiflorum. That's from China. That's very dark, like musky flavor, and that's a tonic often used for men that have low energy, low vitality, fatigue, and maca root. You give most men maca for like 3 or 4 days if they've got any type of low libido. Message you like, oh, can I have another 6 months of maca, please? That's like the best thing I've ever taken. And then the nootropic section of herbs seems to be very powerful for a lot of men. So nootropics are herbs that seem to have an effect on the brain, so memory, focus, concentration. They seem to have an ability to push blood and nutrients to underperfused areas of the brain. We see a lot of nootropics being really good for ADHD in children, and ADD and stuff like that. But in men especially, if they're a bit burnt out, maybe underachievers, fearful, scared of things, don't want to take risks, as well as a lack of vitality and all of that. The combination of tonics, nootropics together just seems to light up most men and give them kind of like, whoa, like the lens has been lifted a little bit, and they can start to see how maybe their behaviors are actually making themselves sick. And flipping that around, that's always a big part of my practice, is trying to show people that your health is more within your control than out of your control, and that there's a lot of things that people are doing that are contributing towards your sickness than what you realize. And when people see the different things that they're doing on their own, like I try not to like force people to see them. It's kind of, you got to nudge people to find that. It's like, it's magic. People can make that choice. Do you want to sacrifice that behavior because it's holding you back, and maybe we could fill it with something that's really powerful and strong and helps you develop and gives you more security in life? Do you want to do that? And I'd say that most men do.
And then for men in addiction, what's your experience? Are you finding men with alcohol or drugs, or, I mean, it's the same issues that you've mentioned earlier about the archetypes and the identity, but what's your experience so far with addiction, helping people with addiction?
It's a void. It's a black hole that seems to be filled with things that kind of stop you from going there. So addiction seems to be the perfect tool to do things that in the short term keep you above some sort of container or thing inside you that you don't want to look at, or it's filled with a particular darkness, or an element of your history that is difficult, challenging. It might be abusive, it could be traumatic, something that's happened to you, something very difficult, and it's always unique for every person. But it always fascinates me how addictions always seem to be focused on dopamine pathway activities, and they're very powerful, usually very powerful substances. So if it's plants, it's coffee, cocaine, tobacco. If it's technology, it's phones, screens, pornography, and then if it's behaviors, then it's stuff around. Sometimes it can be excessive exercise, or even laziness, not leaving the house and wanting to do anything. I think the realm of addictions can kind of move and sway across all different areas, and the absolute antidote to addiction is purpose and mission, meaning. It's very, I would say, in my experience, that the men that have the most addictions are the ones that lack, and the most severe addictions are the ones that in general lack the lack purpose, or if they have a purpose, it's maybe not as well thought through as what they thought, and maybe there's a darker element to that purpose that's tripping them up in some way. So and I'm trying to help them with that, clean that up, make your mission in life a bit more honorable or accountable in some way.
And how do men respond to that? Because I really think you're dead on there. I totally agree with you about mission and purpose being at the root of addiction and even depression. How do you find that they respond, to that aspect of what they need to do? If somebody's not very active, not very involved, very passive, not going out, how do you break that cycle?
Well, you can't just point everything out on day one, and most men even know. This is the thing. It's not like they don't know. Most of them know that what they're doing is limiting them, and they don't like it. Yeah. But it's not a good start if I start my consultation and just go, you shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that, shouldn't be doing this. They already know that. Yeah. The best way to start is to have conversations about what stuff are you actually interested in. What have you ever done anything in your life where your heart actually kind of ignited in some way and time stood still for like a minute or 5 minutes, something that you were doing, playing with, or engaging in? Because to me, that is the gateway to mission. It's a connecting with your lover archetype, which is all about sensations, it's about experience, it's about feelings and emotions. And when your lover archetype is embodied and coming through you, when you're curious and playing with something, that's usually the connection that you need to then recognize, well, that's for you. That thing that you were doing where time stood still and you didn't even think, like, go with it. Because I see that in my own life. I can do stuff about herbs all day and I never get bored ever. If I do stuff that's not herbs, I get bored and then I think and I switch off. So I'm always trying to just have these introductory conversations about what is it that's inside of you that maybe you remember from the past that you enjoyed, or you've not looked at, or you've felt deflated every time you think about doing it. And if you start having those conversations, and then maybe trying to get them to commit that the worst of their addiction, maybe they could swap it for something. So negotiating with them. So if they come into my practice and if they have lots of alcohol and drug problems, maybe they can see if they can limit one and not worry about the others, or drink more coffee or something. Just trying to negotiate.
Small
and
steps.
Then when they actually start taking the medicine and the plants start to work, and suddenly their energy levels go up, the nootropics change how they think, and they start to think about the past differently in the future. Their blood pressure equalizes because their hormones are starting to regulate themselves. Their nervous system starts to balance itself. Suddenly their whole thinking process and the pattern that they were in, which is now kind of breaking apart and coming back together how it should be, they actually feel like a what I call like a momentum. So when people start taking the herbs, there's this kind of feeling that as the weeks go by, people can see the changes and then almost start to see where this is going. And then I'm using language and questions and analysis to just try and like facilitate a little bit of a nudge along that way. So gentle questioning at first, no shaming, no guilt tripping or anything like that. Totally honouring every man's position, all the mad crazy stuff that he's done in his life and whatever he wants to share, it's like it's all welcome. And then those questions of like, what are you doing, why are you doing it, where do you want to be, what type of man inspires you? It's amazing how many men who have mental health issues and they're flat and depressed and deflated and addicted, when you say to them, name me a man that inspires you and tell me why he inspires you, and it's just like there's nothing. There's absolutely nothing. They might find it easier to talk about a fantasy film character, which is obviously what I mentioned before, that the films seem to they're holding on to masculine archetypes, waiting for us to, there seems to be this interplay between film and humans, and in our society, the films are carrying the archetypes, waiting for us to grab onto. But there's very few real men that those types of men in patients come in and start to describe it. It barely ever happens, and that I think is that's the spark really. And trying little activities to get men to find inspiration. Go on YouTube and start searching for men that are in the realm of public speaking, that when you listen to them you light up, because that man is speaking to you. You are literally building an energetic bond, and there's something in him that is igniting you if you can listen to him for hours and hours and hours, days and days and days, and it's like a sponge. You're just gonna suck it in. So I'm always trying to push men and to say, look, like you need to be spending time on YouTube finding somebody that inspires you. And I don't need to be people I suggest. It just needs to be somebody that talks about life, spirit, psychology, business, healing, therapy, the world. There's so many choices. Just find somebody that talks to you.
It makes total sense. I'm thinking of Ram Dass, who's somebody I just keep listening to him either on podcasts or on YouTube, and he's so funny because he's not so invested in identity, in the ego. He's constantly aware, and I just find it great. So I totally relate to that, find somebody. And it strikes me then, just going back to the archetypes, what are the dominant negative archetypes that men in addiction or drugs or porn or whatever, what is the dominant archetype? I mean, what archetype are they playing?
Well, there isn't one individual archetype that I would say they're playing, and I've never heard anyone suggest that. And remember, the archetypes are somewhat mysterious, and this isn't like they're not black and white. We can have one person in a room do and act a certain way for a few hours, and then you ask 10 men watching him describe his archetype map, and you're going to get a different selection of answers. So it's not that straightforward. But I would say that in our society, we seem to have a lot of stuff going on with the addicted lover. So that comes from what Freud described as the Oedipal complex. So that's where the child, let's say the boy, has sexual romantic feelings for his mother, and the girl for the father, and sort of vice versa. And they're subtle feelings. They're not that conscious. And the way I understand it is that ritual and initiation is very good at chopping that connection and helping the child step into a mature role in life without being stuck in an immature, needy state. So we see, I think in our society, we see a lot of addicted lover stuff going on, where men seem to be obsessed with instant sexual gratification around the objectification of the feminine. The shadow warrior, so glorifying gangster stuff,
Okay. Yeah.
glorification of gangster music, which sometimes can have incredible, it's not all hip hop or rap is negative. It's just sometimes there's definitely elements that I've heard in my life, and not just that, there's other forms of music that seem to celebrate like untold violence or behaviors that I wouldn't call a mature warrior. Shadow magician would be stuff around technology. So we seem to be obsessed with creating technology that makes life easier, but at the expense of making us all lazy and depressed and flat. And we seem to be creating a huge distance between what I think men did for thousands of years, which was delayed gratification. So throughout history, before modern technology, most things that men did took plenty of time to reap their benefits. So whether you planted corn and you had to wait months, your field, you had to go off and hunt for the food for the camp, the tribe. There was a huge amount of I'm going to think about something that needs to happen, but there's a lot of time and waiting and that goes into finally capturing that thing. And men seem to be kind of hardwired for that. And I think now technology has just shortened that distance where you can get sex, food, money, like whatever you want on your phone like that. And we seem to have now a culture of teenage boys that just like, they've got no experience of the outdoors. They won't eat foods that are, unless they're coated in sugar and fat and it's, you can see this how technology seems to have influenced that in some way. And then finally the last masculine archetype, certainly the one that I use in my practice and in MKP, is the king. And the king archetype is something that comes through wisdom. It's about understanding your boundaries and understanding how to police what comes into your life and what you let out. It's ultimately the balance of chaos and order, which I guess you could say sits at the heart of every decision of everything that we ever do. And we don't have, I would say, any politicians that stand out as being men that we can look to and say, well, here's a man in power. And do I identify with him? Is he honourable? And is he acting with integrity? And is he somebody that's actually ruling for good or ruling for himself? And so again, there's just this seems to be this dysfunctional relationship between all of them. And if you understand the archetypes, you can see that they play out whether men understand them or not. Like they're always happening. It's not like politicians know what archetypes are. Maybe some do. Maybe the footballers, the musicians. This is the beauty of archetypes, is that they seem to span all time, all cultures. And Jung put forward this theory of the collective unconscious, that when babies are born, they're not a blank slate. It's not like their life experience dictates how they're going to be. The collective unconscious is this almost like software that's passed on from all of your ancestors through time, of symbols, shapes, colours, representations, meaning, and they play out in strange ways.
That's fascinating. I really think there's a lot in that. And probably it's back to that thing about, you're talking about men, trying to find a man that stimulates and inspires you. In some way, that's probably tapping into into that primal software, that in our inheritance, in our deep kind of geological gene inheritance, we're inheriting this software that is powerful. But
Abs-
society is constantly distracting us with, you know, certain pathways that are not sustainable for the world or for ourselves. But I was thinking there, you mentioned politicians, about Donald Trump. You know, in some way, he's inhabiting a number of archetypes, and he's inspiring certain population of people who feel very probably disempowered, disfranchised, and that's the sad thing, is if we're not aware of the archetype at play, we'll get sucked into an archetype that will trap us or elude us or trick us, like a false politician or a false celebrity. And there's a need for authenticity, isn't that the key, isn't it? We need authenticity, and and how hard it is, because we're very influenced by the crowd, and we're very influenced by trends, and it's so hard to stand out. Like, as herbalists, we know in many ways we're kind of early adapters in terms of herbal medicine. Maybe in 10, 20 years time, we know that there's a collective move towards organic and natural and herbal and green and sustainable medicine, but it's still isolating to take this path and know that we're going against the collective consciousness, even though we need leadership. We need leadership in healing. We need leadership in both healing men and women. And in all areas of society, we need healers. So, Jonny, this has been really fascinating chat for myself. I've been really inspired, actually, chatting to you and listening to you and sharing your experience. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
So, if people watching this video want to find you, where would they go and find you?
You can find me on Instagram as Jonny Woodall, WOODALL, at Jonny's Apothecary. That word that nobody seems to know how to spell,
including myself.
So that's APOTHECARY, Jonny's Apothecary, and that's on Facebook, Instagram, and www.jonnysapothecary.com. And I work Sheffield, Manchester, and online, Skype,
Great.
WhatsApp, and patients all over the UK and Europe. And thank you for having me. I've really appreciated finally having a conversation with you. And wish you all the best with everything. You're doing an amazing job.
Thanks.
Really inspiring.
Thanks, Jonny. And I'll put all your links in the description below. So if anybody wants to follow Jonny or find out more about him, definitely follow up and contact him. And I'm sure we'll do more collaborations, maybe a podcast or another video, who knows. But definitely it's great to share the conversation, the experiences, because we're learning every day, and if you're not learning, you're stuck. So that's kind of what I really like, is just keep nurturing the learning and keep opening the mind. So that's it. Thanks, Jonny, and thanks for watching this video. And if you liked it, give it a thumbs up and drop us a comment, and I'll see you in a video very soon. Thank you. Take care.